So that brings us through to the last stage of the renovation or cosmetic renovation process, which is obviously the staging and the sale. So we actually bought about 80% of the furniture ourselves rather than hiring most of it. And look, it's a good idea if you've got the storage at home and you're willing to take it to and from your projects yourself. You can save a lot of money. We spent probably $3,500 on all the furniture, which lasted us, through 6 or 7 projects. Now it would have been probably $3,500 per project if we'd been hiring the furniture. We did hire some extra bits and pieces from Pab's warehouse here in Brisbane. It's always important to, if you don't have the cushions or the artwork you need, just go and hire a few bits and pieces to really give it that wow factor when you're doing your staging. We took our own photos for this one. You'll see the photos in this video. I'll be putting up a few photos before and after, but I don't recommend taking your own photos. Something that we've learned since then, they just don't look as good. Unless you're a professional photographer, you know exactly how to take the photos and you have the equipment to take them, it's not going to look as good. And when people are looking through online, you want them to look at your photos of your house and go, wow, that looks fantastic. You don't want it to be those average photos, especially when you're competing against real estate agencies who use professional photographers. There's a big point there. Get someone in to take your photos. It makes a huge difference. So we listed it ourselves through a company called realprivate.com.au. It's really a great option when you're selling the lower priced houses. I'm a big advocate of people selling their own properties, especially when you're doing it as a business. It can be different when you're doing it as your own home because you're so emotionally invested in the home that you can't really separate it out and have a proper negotiation with someone. But Real Private, it's around $300 to $400, gets it on Domain and realestate.com, and it also it has an option of a call center so that when the calls come through, someone answers them, takes the person's details, forwards it to you, and if you don't answer it, they send you an email with all of the caller's details, which is obviously fantastic if you're at work or something else. But again, you need to approach it as a business transaction. If you can't approach it as a business transaction and get rid of the emotion, then you need to get an agent. It's 100%, because you will lose out if you can't separate out the emotion. So with this property, it was a big learning curve. We had a couple of issues. So contract number 1 we had on it, nice family, loved the home. They were very, very nervous from the start. They were nervous about everything. They asked 100 million questions, and you could tell that they were the sort of people that sort of got spooked by anything when it comes to buying property. So we signed the contract at a great price, $465,000. Absolute nightmare building in Pest. This is why I wrote an article last week, is how to prepare for a building in Pest, because this building in Pest was horrendous. I mean, not only was he rude and nasty, it was raining when he came, boots on, trudging out into the yard, into the mud, trudging it back through the house, no questions asked. Just really not a nice chap. But he also came up with some comments and some advice for the buyers, which was actually entirely wrong. For instance, we had all the paperwork from the trade that did the roof. So he got up and had a look at the roof. He came down and he said, the roof's asbestos, it's untouched. It was quite clearly painted and sealed, and we had all the paperwork, but the building and pest guy said, no, it's untouched, it's old, it's damaged, and it's, it needs to be replaced. And then there was another incident where there was a small piece of sheeting on the exterior of the house that we had missed, that was actually just leaning out a little bit from the house. Obviously very easy fix, just need to be reattached. He told the buyers that the structure of the house was off, and that it was actually on an angle, and that it was potentially going to collapse. Something which obviously I confirmed was not true at all with our builder after he had a look at it. And all we had to do again was fix up the sheeting. But unfortunately, in this particular situation, the buyers, and as most people would, they listened to this building and pest guy. He actually scared them off, and they cancelled the contract immediately, didn't even negotiate. which was obviously a bit of a kick in the teeth for our first project. So contract number 2, we signed with a couple who were obviously very interested in the house. We signed at $455,000, but they had another property that they were trying to sell. And so obviously we signed subject to sale of their other property, but we put in a sunset clause. If you're not familiar with a sunset clause, essentially what it says is, we have a contract, but until you actually confirm that your property is sold and we're unconditional, we have the opportunity to cancel that contract if we get another one. Now we put that in because, you know, it could have taken them 6 months to sell their property. As it happened, we actually did get another offer come across. We gave them the opportunity to go through with the contract, but their house was nowhere near being sold, so they could not go unconditional with the contract. They couldn't give us a guarantee they were going to buy a house, so we had to cancel that contract, which gave us contract number 3. Now this is quite odd to have this many contracts, and it was certainly an interesting learning curve on our first project. Contract number 3, $460,000. I still remember the day. It was the day in 2017, early 2017, where half of Brisbane was underwater. Everything was flooding. It was hammering it down with rain. But we were sitting in the house. We sat there for about 3 or 4 hours while we went through everything. And I was very happy with the fact that there were absolutely no issues with the property at all, even with the heaviest rain you've seen in a long time. So we sat down. We went through it all. We signed the contracts, and it was actually a cash unconditional offer, which I wasn't very familiar with, and it being my first property I'd sold, I was quite skeptical. And until we actually settled on the property, to be honest, I was skeptical all the way through, or nervous all the way through that something was going to happen and he was going to pull out. Anyway, it all ended up good, all ended up going through, ended up with a great result for our first renovation, and obviously we were absolutely stoked with that. So lastly, what I'd like to do is go through what were the main big lessons that we learned from this project that help us develop and helped us grow into our next few projects. So the first one, always get an early access clause to allow you to get in and get quotes during that settlement period. As I said, when we were going into that Christmas period, it was tough because no one was working. But if we'd got in beforehand, gotten our quotes, we could have locked it in and probably knocked a couple of weeks off our final time frame, because we did have to sit there three odd weeks over Christmas where no one was doing anything. Always get at least 3 quotes for everything you do. That's a big one. As I mentioned in the previous video, one painter quoted $25,000. We ended up getting it done for about $11,000 for the entire house. So that's a huge difference. And when your profit margin's only $40,000, you know, that is more than a quarter of your profit. It's massive. Always allow a contingency for your renovation costs to go up. And you should do that whether you're experienced or not, but if you're just starting, allow 20 or 30%, because realistically, how good are your estimations going to be if you've never estimated before? Mine were rubbish. So make sure you allow a good amount of contingency, and make sure the project still makes sense, still makes money, even at, you know, that 30% extra on what you're estimating. So be careful how much DIY you try to take on yourself. A big one we learned here, a lot of it you won't be able to do because you'll just not do a good enough job, or you might start and then realize how much work it is and that it's better to get someone else in to do it. Just be careful what you plan to do DIY. We wrote an article last week about how we approach DIY, and it's a very different approach to the traditional approach. So if you're interested, have a look at our blog. It goes into a little more detail there. Always look for budget alternatives. So again, we probably saved in the vicinity of $20,000 on this project by looking at budget alternatives for the kitchen and the roof and other areas. If we hadn't saved that $20,000, this project would have made very little money. Always prepare thoroughly for the building and pest. That's a big one. Preempt any issues with in the house with the buyers before the building and pest. Discuss all of the issues. It's better that you discuss the asbestos roof that's been treated and show them the paperwork than the building and pest comes through, tells them it's an asbestos roof, and they get scared and cancel. Or in our case, when we actually bought the property, no one told us it was an asbestos roof. We ended up getting a $15,000 discount off the purchase price. So make sure you preempt all of the issues, have all your documents and forms and everything ready so that you can give it to the buyer and make sure that they're 100% comfortable with any of the small issues. It's an old house. If you're doing cosmetic renovation, it's going to be an old house. So it's always going to have issues, but you just need to make sure you handle them right at the start before any of the issues come up in the building and pest. The last thing with this project, and a big one that we think, especially when you're doing a cosmetic renovation, and again, you're going to make $40,000, maybe $50,000. If you're paying an agent to sell your property, that's going to be 25%, 30% of your profit that you're going to have to pay to that agent. Is the project still going to be feasible if you have to pay that commission? So for us, when you're doing these projects as a business, or you're doing these projects as a side business, something to make money, you should be able to sell the property yourself quite effectively. Read up on how to sell properties yourself. There's a couple of books that I've actually mentioned in our blog as well that you can get stuck into, and it sort of gives you the guidelines. But just handle it properly. Wear business attire. Print off some brochures. Handle it like an agent would handle it. And there's no reason you can't sell the property yourself and save yourself, $10 or $12 or $15,000 on the back end there. So look, that's it. That's our first real flip. The good parts and the bad parts. Obviously, it was a massive learning curve for us. So hopefully you enjoyed it. We look forward to chatting to anyone that would like to chat to us. Any questions anyone has, and obviously if you are interested in our stories, our ideas, our experiences, please make sure you check us out on Instagram or Facebook. So it's Hooper Homes Briz, BRIS, or subscribe to our newsletter at www.hooperhomes.com.au, which we send out every week. We'll send out a number of updates and different pieces of content around the property industry. So thanks for listening, and here are some before and after photos of the project for you to check out.